Call the Board of Supervisors to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Supervisor White. Here. Supervisor Horton. Here. Supervisor Schutte.
Here.
Supervisor Chiomi.
Here.
Mayor Bagwell.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you so much. We're now on to agenda item number 3, which is our invocation. And Mike Ashton from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is here to start us off this morning.
Our Father in heaven, we gather this day in gratitude for the gifts and blessings we receive at thy hand. We are grateful for the beauties of the land in which we enjoy, for the freedoms and liberty that we experience. We are grateful for the opportunities that are provided us through the Constitution of the United States, the opportunities to represent ourselves, to have stewardship for the liberties that we enjoy. We ask that would inspire those stewards this day that are meeting to discuss important principles and actions that will enhance our community. Bless them with wisdom, with insight, and with the power to enact means and plans that will bring satisfaction and enjoyment to the citizens here in Carson City. We are grateful ultimately for the liberties we find through thy Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ. Help us to learn of him, to follow him, and to find joy in his example. We pray for the citizens of Carson City that they will be mindful of the liberties they have, that they will act in a way to better our community, to help it to grow in meaningful and important ways that we may see progress, enlightenment, and greater happiness. We ask that would help us all find strength in the opportunities we have to be an influence for good upon those around us, we ask. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Thank you so much for starting us off. Miss Paulson, will you lead us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much, both. Have a good day. Okay, we're now on to agenda item number 5, which is our opening public comment. And Danny, you just wrote yes. So didn't tell me if it was on an item or at the beginning. Okay, so we'll go with yes.
I'd like to thank Mr. Ashmore for the invocation. I asked him to put a little plug in for me. I'm extremely nervous today, but I have a message, one that relates to a situation I observed. Denny French, Carson City, Nevada. An observation I made on Sunday. I had heard that there was an red flag warning out, and that it would be scheduled from 2 to 10 p.m. on Sunday. I went out to look. I didn't get there till after 2. I wanted to see what the response and the signage would be, and open space had nothing there as far as I could find at either this Snyder entrance off of Golden Eagle Lane, nor at the Prison Hill area of the OHV entrance, nor at their staging. Found nothing. I called Ranger John Costello, as he had instructed, should I have an observation or a concern or a consideration that didn't warrant a 911 call, that I would let him know. I called and left him a message. I hadn't heard, so I called dispatch, which was the second name on the list that he had given me on his card. Dispatch seemed not to know anything about the red flag warning. I happened to hear that on KUNR, KOLO, Channel 8 News. Just a little blip, not much of a statement about that. It's interesting because on Saturday, I had seen the young lady from that station, and I thanked her for that warning, awareness blip that they had on their television. The deal is that she seemed to have put it out there, but even Open Space had not gotten the message. So I am very concerned about that, and with the fire chief today, I am so glad that Lisa Schutte, supervisor, was at that meeting because she brought up my concern after I had mentioned it in my opening statement. Had she not done that, there would have been no discussion. And with that, Ms. Boyer spoke for Open Space, and she ensured Supervisor Schutte that she would be talking to the chief. And I think that's the only reason Supervisor Schutte did not pursue the conversation. I'd like to add that I think it should be an open meeting. I think it should be transparent, and I think we should come up with a specific way of response that is standardized and should be able to be expected. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have Dana, maybe Molwig from Wildland Fire Crew says yes. Come on up, Dana. No, that's okay.
Hi, my name is Danny Mullivis. I'm the president of Kings Canyon Meadows Homeowners Association. And I'm here to raise my voice in support of any financial resources that can be given to the wildland fire crews. I think the work they do is just invaluable for the Carson, for our community. And specifically, they have been really helpful to Kings Canyon Meadows. For the last 2 summers, we've partnered with them to help us with our defensible space projects. And they've done a fantastic job. They work really hard and selflessly. And I think that in helping our community, we're a Firewise, nationally recognized Firewise community. And I think that in helping our community, we helped the surrounding communities be safer as well. So I would like to ask that they get as much resource as they can. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Deb Case. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Deborah Case. I am the coordinator of the Firewise program for King Canyon Meadows HOA. And I'd like to echo everything that Danny has just said and add maybe a little bit more detail about how much Carson City Fire has helped us become a Firewise adapted community. They have been instrumental in helping us meet our goals. We had an open line of communication with Carson City Fire if we had questions. As we were putting together our action plan, they supported us by sending out dumpsters, huge dumpsters, into our community like twice a year so that our homeowners, when they remove their junipers or cut back foliage from near the house or dead brush, whatever, they had a place where they could deposit it. So that really facilitated our community beginning to move out fuel, wildfire fuel. In addition, as Danny mentioned, they sent out crews to really address some big problem areas that we had in our community. One large area in particular where rabbit brush had just gone out of control, where they had to use chainsaws and giant brush mowers to get in there and help us reduce that fuel. In addition, Fire Chief Mike Wilkinson was, anytime a property owner had a question about how they could make changes on their property to make their home better fire adapted, he would come out, do an assessment, give them a report, all kinds of materials. So we have been very, very supported by Carson City Fire, and we want to thank them publicly and to support them in any kind of additional funding that they might be able to receive.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't have anyone else signed up, but just in case. Anybody else with? No? Okay, then we're going to move on to agenda item 6. This is approval of our minutes of May 16, 2024. Does any member have any changes? Nope, I'll take a motion for approval then.
I move to approve the minutes from May 16th, 2024.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Aye from Stacy. Let the record reflect that was unanimous. We're now on to our consent agenda. We are going to approve everything. 12C will be removed from the consent for discussion. May I have a motion on the remainder of the calendar, please? Your 12C is
can
the
do it. I
item
can do it.
being pulled for discussion.
I move,
I can make a run at it here,
Oh,
if you can hear me well enough.
Uh-huh.
I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of items 7A, 8A, 9A, 10A, 11A, 12A, 12B, 13A through 13E, and 14A, all as presented.
I second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. He's an aye. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. We're now going to discuss agenda item 12C, discussion and possible action regarding a resolution to extend by 5 years the term of an agreement with for the LaPiccolo families 1998 trust doing business as LaPiccolo Investments LLC to lease approximately 31 square feet of the Carson City right-of-way designated as assessor's parcel 003-112-99 to the tenant for the installation and operation of an automated teller machine. Mr. Nellis, is there any additional information or something that we need on this item?
Good morning, Mayor, members of the board. I think you covered the summary quite well, Mayor. I don't have anything additional to add.
Mr. White, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you. On page 244, at 2.2, lease extension, it says there that the tenant shall provide the city with notice to stay on the premises not less than 90 days. I noticed that tenant did not give the city notice. It was well short of the 90 days. So I'm wondering, how do we get to where we're doing this action today?
Mr. Reese?
Certainly. Supervisor White, thank you for the question. You are correct that it's my understanding that the tenant did not give the 90-day notice. In the contract, in the lease agreement, there is a renewal provision whereby the tenant is required to give 90 days notice, and under that provision, then the Board of Supervisors can agendize that and approve the extension of the lease. In your board packet today, or I should say, that because the 90-day notice was given, that internal process within the lease wasn't triggered. However, the parties can always amend the lease. That's why in your packet you will see an amendment to the lease extending the term of the lease. That can be done by mutual consent of the parties, meaning the tenant and the board. And it can be done, the parties can amend the lease at any time. So it can be done by amendment, even though the processes internal to the lease were not taken advantage of.
Thank you.
Do I have any further questions on this? No. Is there any public comment on item 12C? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for a motion.
I move to adopt resolution number 2024-R-13.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect the motion was unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we are now on to agenda item 16A. Discussion and possible action regarding a proposed resolution for temporary interfund loan from the Regional Transportation Fund to the Campo for an amount not to exceed $346,000, from the General Fund to the Transit Fund for an amount not to exceed $821,000. This is our standard year-end, make sure the fund's not negative when we get audited. Ms. Benaboo, is there further discussion on this item?
That's correct. It is fairly standard. We only transfer what we need to get the balance to zero if there happens to be a cash shortage at June 30th. This one's the one we're kind of between a rock and a hard place because GASB, our standards board, requires that all cash balances be positive or zero. NRS requires us to get a loan. So we have to guess what that loan might be and which funds might need that loan. So that's all we're doing here.
And it always, just for the public, it always reverses, and the reason for it is because
Yes.
these are vastly grant funded, and therefore we have to spend the money to get a reimbursement. So it's just a
Absolutely.
timing issue.
Absolutely.
Right. I just want to make sure the public understands we're not giving up the money. It's just sometimes 10 days means 10 days. Any other questions on this one? Seeing none. Do I have any public comment on this item? Okay, I'll take a motion, please.
I move to adopt resolution number 2024-R-14.
I second.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. We're now on to agenda item 16B, discussion and possible action regarding a proposed resolution to augment and amend the Carson City fiscal year 23-24 budget in the amount of $771,610. Ms. Benaboo.
Thank you. So these are fairly standard. Everything should have come to this board, or there's a few items that went to IFC. The majority of this is the debt that we issued. There were quite a few augmentations due to the negotiations that we did last year. They were not included in the 24 budget. Well, they kind of were, but we have to move them from contingency into the various departments that needed them that we negotiated for. And then there were some other things regarding the elections, some inflationary items. If you have any questions, I'm happy to go through the whole thing, or we can just ask questions about it.
Members, was there any particular item on here you'd like to discuss? Pretty routine. Okay, nothing for Stacy either. Okay, is there any public comment on this item? Mr. French?
Denny French, Carson City. I would have liked to put this on to the consent agenda and then pull several off, but I had, my concerns had to be in my 3 minutes. I just appreciate that Ms. Russell's on so many of these. Did I get that right? I am nervous, but yes, that she has to cover so much, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. Is there any other public comment? Okay, Supervisor White, a motion, please.
I move to adopt resolution number 2024-R-15.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. We're now on to agenda item 16C, discussion and possible action regarding a proposed agreement for excess workers' compensation and employers' liability insurance with Safety National Casualty Corporation for a total estimated premium of $205,004. Got to get that in there, for fiscal year 2025. Again, standard renewals, but Ms. Benaboo, anything special? we need
It
to know
is
about?
standard renewals. I will say that the initial estimate was 7.2% increase, and we got the numbers down a little bit, so we are working to negotiate. Our representative from the pool is here for the next item, D, and also Brendan, he's our broker, he's here as well if you have any questions, any of the specific intricate questions about the market.
Did anybody have a question on this item? No. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for a motion. Supervisor Horton.
I move to approve the agreement as presented.
Second.
Second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Let the record reflect it was unanimous. We're now on to agenda item 16D, discussion and possible action regarding our insurance agreements for total aggregate premium not to exceed $1,517,390 for fiscal year 25. To be paid from the insurance fund with the pool for property insurance, boiler and machinery, pollution, cyber insurance, auto liability, general liability, employment practices, errors and omissions, law enforcement liability at a premium not to exceed $1,501,394, and Great American Insurance for crime, employee dishonesty at a premium not to exceed $15,996. Ms. Benafou, is there anything? share on
Nothing
these?
too exciting. It went up 7.3%, which is a lot of actual increase in the value of the properties. It's, I think the pool works very, very hard to get their partners to stay low as far as the premium goes. And again, they're here if you have any specific questions.
So just in general, for an understanding on that, is there two components? One, just general rate increase versus additional assets being covered?
Yes, exactly. So when our asset value goes up, the premium is going to be higher because the value is higher. But the rate sometimes increases and then it goes up as well. So this is property and liability, right? So it's both of those. So there's two components to this. That's why it's such a large number. You know, you can see from the backup, there's earthquake, there's flood, there's so many components to this, and we really have some great limits. And I think we're going to be okay.
And did we lose any coverage? I know for a while there, like cybersecurity was not being rated at that level, right, for claims. So did we
Right,
see
so that was
any-
last year. So it was,
Right.
so last year the limit was $3 million. It went down to 1 million. However, after discussions with experts and everything, we discussed the idea that a lot of times, you know, this is public knowledge. It's in the documentation today. So a bad actor would come and try to, you know, take our system over, and they'll look at our insurance policy as to how much they can get from us. So it's almost better that we have a low insurance policy because they won't be interested in going after us because we don't have that much money.
Let's hope that's a great idea that you just
This is,
stated on the
you know,
record, that they don't come
unfortunately,
after
this
us.
is kind of the game we're playing, yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? I don't see anybody Do I have any public comment on this item? Mr. French?
Mr. French, Denny French. I expected pages and pages on this because it's so involved. Just recently, Boston had an issue with its 911 having been breached. So security of our informations and our communications are huge, and so I'm glad we've got it covered. Thank you.
Thanks. Do I have any further public comment? Okay, I'll bring it back up here for a motion then. Supervisor White?
I move to approve the agreements as presented.
I second.
There's a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. We're now on to discussion, 17A, discussion and possible action to adopt on a second reading Bill number 104. Mr. Hone, may I have the title, please?
An ordinance relating to zoning, changing the zoning from public to retail commercial for a portion of right-of-way located along South Carson Street and South Stewart Street, just north and east of the roundabout adjacent to assessor parcel numbers 004-011-01 and 004-011-02, and providing other matters properly relating thereto.
Thank you so much. Ms. Sullivan, have we had any changes from the first reading or public comment come in?
No,
Nothing?
no.
Is there anyone, question? No. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion. Supervisor White?
I move to adopt on second reading Bill number 104, ordinance number 2024-4.
Second.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Let the record reflect it was unanimous. He's doing a good job raising his hand over there. Thank you, Stacy, for helping. 17B, discussion and possible action regarding a proposed resolution establishing a maximum, I'll just do it this way. Proposed resolution. 17B. Mr. Hone, may I have the title, please? Wait a minute.
A resolution amending the maximum number of residential building permit allocations under the Carson City Growth Management Ordinance for the years 2025 and 2026, estimating the maximum number of residential building permit allocations for the years 2027 and 2028, establishing the number of residential building permit allocations available within the development, project, and general property owner categories, and establishing a maximum average daily water usage and criteria for decision-making for commercial and industrial building permits as a threshold for Growth Management Commission review.
Ms. Sullivan, you want to give us some highlights of this, please?
Sure. The Growth Management Commission met on May 29, 2024. For 2025, the Growth Management Commission is recommending allowing a 3% growth rate, which is what we've had for quite some time now, which would translate into 779 allocations in 2025. The Growth Management Commission also recommends retaining the non-residential threshold at 10,000 gallons per day average, and the criteria in the resolution that uses that receive the non-residential allowance, if you will, have to utilize water conservation measures and techniques and must promote health, welfare, safety, or quality of life, or create quality jobs, or promote recreation and tourism. Included in the packet are the comments from department heads and the superintendent of schools that the various agencies can accommodate 3% growth. I know this seems like a big number, so I want to go through what happened in 2023. We're still in 2024, so I don't have the 2024 numbers. In calendar year 2023, we had 744 residential allocations available. 520 building permits for housing starts were issued, and that was a really busy year. So we've been, and as you'll see in a couple of minutes, consistently coming in below the allowable allocations. By way of background, the Growth Management Commission is responsible for annually reviewing the information provided by various city departments and outside agencies, and for submitting a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. This recommendation establishes the number of residential permits to be made for the following 2 years and estimates the number to be made available in years 3 and 4. It also establishes a distribution of the building permit entitlements between the general property owner and the development category. The development category means they're obtaining 31 or more permits in a quarter. And it also establishes the maximum average daily water usage for commercial and industrial building permits as part of the threshold for growth management. 1812 talks about growth management, and what it says in part is when the board considers growth management and how many allocations and what the threshold should be, it should consider the city's water quality, quantity, supply, capacity, infrastructure. Similarly with city sewer, sheriff protection services, fire protection services, traffic and circulation, drainage and flooding, school enrollment and capacity, parks and recreation, and other services as determined by the board. So this year, we did receive input from the clerk's office, the library, and health and human services, in addition to the ones that are stated in the code. The Growth Management Commission did request that next year I receive information from the senior center. They felt with the demographics, it was really important to understand how growth was impacting that facility. The Growth Management Ordinance was originally implemented in the late 1970s in response to a moratorium by the State Division of Water Resources on new subdivisions in Carson City due to wastewater and water capacity issues. Typically, this time of year, we look at historical data. So when we look at the historical data, and I reference this, if we look at the number of building permits issued versus the available allocations, you'll see that since the 1980s, we've essentially been below the number of allocations. We have the two categories in the code, the general category and the developer category. I think the thought process there is they don't want a developer to come in and get all the allocations. So there's two buckets, if you will, initially. What's been happening since around 2008 is the developer category is not really being utilized. And that's because, unless it's like an apartment complex, which that blip in 2017's Carson Hills Apartments, because developers since 2008 are not carrying inventory. So they're not coming in for 31 building permits. They're coming in for a small, lesser number, and they're building as they sell so that they don't get stuck with the inventory they were stuck with in around 2008. So the apartment complexes are a little bit different, but what you'll see is we're just really not using the developer category because the private sector is not requesting to utilize it. Growth management allocation issued by type. What you'll see in this slide is in 2023, it was a busy year, first of all. And keep in mind that 2018 number includes Carson Hills, and that's a bit artificial because I had asked Carson Hills to pull all their permits in 2018, so that didn't creep into 2019 and put us at a deficit at the beginning of 2019. So in 2023, where that's purely the market with no interference at all, we had a lot of multifamily, and those multifamily apartments include Marlette Apartments on Little Lane, Eagles Landing over on Roop, they pulled their building permits, and Sierra Flats over on Bud Eye. But that was a big number in 2023 in terms of housing starts. As we talk about, we run the model that looks at the master plan land use designations against where we are right now in terms of existing units. And based on that model, the city can accommodate, and again, it's based on existing policy, which we're revisiting right now as part of the master plan update. But based on existing policy, we can accommodate an additional 7,212 residential units, which would result in a population of 73,312. This next slide shows it based on land use category. This next one's my most interesting slide. So it's like when the teacher says this will be on the test. Okay, so let's look at this. This is from the state demographer. And it said in 2024, we were going to grow by 1.1%. And then each year after, we go down significantly. But then I look at this slide here, and this I did for the master plan. And it looks at residential entitlements by lot or unit, 2005 to January 2024. So these are entitlements, not building permits. So this is lots that were created and apartment complexes and things like that. So I see that things were slow from 2005 to like 2014. So for 10 years, pretty slow, right? Then in 15 through current, things picked up a lot. So with all these entitlements, that means the building permits follow. How can I be dropping like this? And I actually sat with the state demographer and I showed him the bar chart that I just showed you. And I said, I don't really understand where is this coming from? And it's interesting. He explained the entire state is going to be slowing down in terms of growth. And that was interesting to me. He also explained the model. So the model is 1/3 the census annual update. So what's the census use? The census uses housing, so how many houses got built, births, deaths, and migration, in migration, out migration. So that's a pretty traditional way of looking at demographic growth. 1/3 of his model is what's called the REMI model. And this is interesting. It takes into account labor statistics and employment. I think Carson's pretty flat on labor statistics and employment. I think a lot of our in-migration, if you will, or those occupying new housing are not going into the job market. And so we're not capturing the REMI model. It's looking, are you having more jobs so that you have more people coming in? And I don't think we're getting that. And our last third is the governor's certified population, which half of that is school enrollment. And we know that the school enrollment's dropping. When you look at the classes going down to kindergarten, it's fewer and fewer kids are feeding into those higher the higher classes. So school enrollment, labor force, and employment, we just talked about that. So that's in the 1/3 that is the governor's certified population. Half of that's that regression model, and half is the housing model, which is the houses that were completed, and that data comes from our assessor. So this is interesting. So when you look at the projections from the demographer, I think we need to really drill into what he's modeling it based on, and then kind of question that model a little bit. So I'm not convinced we're going to be this slow based on the demographics that are anecdotally coming into the city. And again, we just reviewed this where it looks like we have a lot coming in the pipeline. And that's why we see so much growth. When we do the master plan meetings, people say, no, we didn't have, 1,800 new people come in over 20 years. It's only been recent. And they're right. We didn't have a lot going on for 10 years and it just picked up. Okay, we always review sale price, although this isn't necessarily related to growth management. So in 2023, our median sale price was $564,000 for a single family home. So it just has consistently been going higher and higher. Here's what's really interesting to me as well. The number of home sales. Look at that drop from 21 to 22 to 23. There's no inventory. And so I already talked about that the builders aren't carrying inventory. People are holding on to their homes. There's just not a lot for sale. And so in 2022, there was 681 single-family homes for sale. In 2023, that dropped to 507. So 681 to 507. That's a pretty significant drop in 1 year for single-family residential, particularly when we have new houses coming on the market. Now we'll talk about non-residential. What the Growth Management Commission they see this every year, is they like to see a snapshot of what growth management allocations have been issued. And I go back to 2008. But this next slide is what they requested this year. They want the status of each of those. And what you'll see is we got a little bit smarter. What we've started doing relatively recently is having these expire if nobody builds it. And that way we're clearing the decks. Some of these have been constructed. We have a couple that are old that were not built. The director has the authority to have these expire and to void them. So I will be pursuing that so that we can clean up the records. because these things are not going to get built. The casino at Highway 50 in Lampa, it was back in '08, and it was never built, and that's a big chunk of water that they had allocated.
Should that slide have a date that those were originally, unless I'm just staring past it?
Well, I'm looking at the '08, that's why I know it was
Oh, that's,
2008.
oh, okay, I'm just saying.
Yeah, we
thank you.
could certainly do that, but I think what this shows us is that we weren't establishing expiration dates, and now as you go to the more recent ones at the top, you'll see we've tied it to an expiration date. So again, the Growth Management Commission reviewed everything I've just reviewed with you and what is in your packet. And they have suggested, in considering the 2% growth, 2.5% growth, and 3% growth, staying with the 3% growth for 2025 and staying with the threshold of 10,000 gallons per day average and continuing to have the criteria in the resolution. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thanks.
Any member have a question?
I do.
Supervisor White?
Of the 779 residential allocations, how are things like adding a mother-in-law's quarters or large remodels handled? You know, if somebody doubles the size of their house, does that take up one of these permits?
If you double the size of your house and it's still a house, it does not. If you build a dwelling, an accessory dwelling, like a mother-in-law's quarters, it does. So for example, we've had three hotels that were serving as long-term stays, so they were essentially functioning as apartments. And that would be the Lander, which changed its name now, the Stewart Street Inn, which also changed its name, and the Roundhouse. They are all they've either completed or they're somewhere in the process of converting from hotel units to studio apartments and one-bedroom apartments. And so each of those used a growth management because it went from a transient use to a residential use. If you were to build an accessory dwelling on your property, it would, say for your mother-in-law or somebody, that would count as a dwelling and that would get a growth management. But if you're just doing an addition to your house and it's not a dwelling, no.
I noticed your presentation had a number of slides that were not included in the packet here, so could you circulate that presentation?
We'll post it with the late material, yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I do.
Supervisor Schutte?
Thank you. So just a quick question again, back to the demographer projections. Yeah, that one doesn't make sense to me either, just because what is projected versus what we are actually seeing does seem inconsistent. So thank you for bringing that up. In terms of the inventory, or actually, let me just back up for a minute. So I have a couple questions that this kind of aligns with last year's conversation as well in terms of growth. And I know that there is consistently concern about growth and how can we accommodate it. And I know that, our infill, it is just obviously more obvious where the growth is happening, whereas in the 80s and the mid 70s, the 90s, so much of the growth was really along the periphery of the community to where it wasn't so obvious. So does the 3% take into consideration the risks and limitations of development? And then what are the risks and limitations associated with reducing the number? So if you could speak a little bit to that, if you don't mind.
Okay, if we go back to sort of the foundation was the city in I think it was the 70s, was allowing subdivision of land without adequate water and wastewater resources. And so the agreement with the state was we will have this growth management ordinance, and every single solitary year, we will review our resources And we will determine how much growth we can accommodate based on those resources and the capacity of those resources. So it's actually very logical. It's actually really good that we do that. And so every single solitary year, we reach out to the different departments. And again, I didn't reach out to Senior Center, but I'll do that next year, and say, can you accommodate 3% growth? And they provide comments back. And you talk about the risk. The risk, I would think, would be a risk of not having available resources and compromising our level of service. That's why we do this. Based on the input received, and that's in your packet, each department we reached out to, and we'll start with utilities, police, fire. I could go through the list. I can't remember everybody right this second. But we reached out to every single one of those departments. The school system's losing people. They're like, yeah, go ahead. So I don't believe there's a risk because of the process we go through is to say, do you have available resources to accommodate a 3% growth? And without exception, everyone said, yes, we can accommodate a 3% growth. We have the resources, we have the capacity. Health department, I think, maybe said we may need another person in environmental health because this may create more demand on that part of our function. But no one said no. So when you say risk, if someone said, nope, we're tapped out, we have zero capacity, we can't go to 3%, I don't believe growth management would have made the recommendation they made. Could you reduce it to 2% or to 2.5%? And this slide is a slide you've been seeing for years because we always give these options. We've stayed with 3% primarily because we can. We haven't hit the number. It's a little bit of an artificial number. We haven't even really come that close to the number, but it just is something we're able to accommodate without compromising the level of service. So we've stayed there. Could we reduce it? Yeah, you could reduce it. But I guess I would question what's the value add? Because we already know that, one, we're not hitting our number. Secondly, if we go to the foundational reason we do this, we do it to see what can our services accommodate. They can accommodate 3%. So why would we not do 3%, knowing we'll probably come in low?
And can you speak to what is the benefit of the accommodation of 3%? I mean, how does that help in terms of housing inventory or, and I know that growth management isn't about housing prices, but that is always such an issue when we talk about master plan or when we talk about businesses, perhaps closing, and I know that that's a concern, but in order for businesses to be open, they have to be able to staff the business. And in order for staff to want to work somewhere, they have to be able to have housing. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. And the other piece you didn't mention that's really important from where I sit is private property rights. So you have people own private property based on zoning and the master plan, but primarily zoning. Master plan, informs what the zoning will be. They have a right to develop their land within the rules of Carson City. So we have rules that say we're not going to allow growth to outpace our ability to provide services. That's a really logical thing to do. It's a really responsible thing to do. So if we were to come in with a lower number, we're then sort of compromising the market potentially because we're saying, well, just for the heck of it, we knew we could accommodate 3%, but we decided to go with 2%. So you, private property owner, who you're allowed to develop your land, but we decided we're only going to allow 510 housing starts this year versus 779. Why did we make that decision? I'm not sure. Because we said we could accommodate 779 without compromising our level of service, but we're not going to let you build. And you'll have to wait till next year and get in line. So that's sort of, when I look at this and I think about it, I'm thinking in those terms. Your point's really well taken, and it's almost part of the master plan. So I like to say the master plan's like a big puzzle. And the younger people bring up these video games I've never heard of. So if you're young, you can use some video game example, but I'm just going to use a puzzle because I'm old and that's why I know. And so you put this puzzle together. The puzzle has the different pieces. And the pieces all have to come together. And those pieces are what you were talking about. How do we stay a vibrant community? Well, we're an employment center first. Well, not first, but that's the first thing I'm saying. We're an employment center. We're a community of people where some of the people work in the community, some don't work in the community, but people who live here avail themselves of the private sector services like the grocery store, like the dentist, like the hospital. And for those services to be here and to be able to operate, they need workers. And where do those workers come from? Are the workers part of your puzzle, or are you importing all your workers? And if you're importing all your workers from Dayton, from Douglas, from Washoe, at some point, are you going to lose those workers because they're going to say, I'm done driving to Carson. I'm just going to find the dental hygienist position in Washoe. So I think what you're talking about is sort of the vibrancy of the community and the need to have and this is what the master plan says right now today, to have a diverse land use so that those puzzle pieces kind of all fit together. And that's today's master plan, and it sounds like that's what the future master plan will continue to have as a core principle.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, is there any public comment on this item? Mr. French.
Thank you, Denny French. I had a concern when I kept seeing that every one of the utilities that you checked into were fine with it, and I'm not sure that I am with their ability to do such. I'm thinking that they're having to give more overtime and that in some cases they're having to contract out. Has that all been factored in with their answers? Because they all seem to say, oh yeah, we're fine. And I'm going, wait a minute. But I have to say that I really appreciated the fact that you did put on a really amazing master plan program for the workshop. And it was really great discussion, and I appreciated it and learned a lot. So I thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back up to the board for a motion or any further discussion. Ready to make a motion? Mr. Horton? Supervisor Horton?
I move to adopt resolution number 2024-R-16.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Stacy's an aye. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we're now on to agenda item 18A, which is discussion and possible action regarding our opioid use and misuse community needs assessment implementation plan, a proposed plan for the use of the funds through the One Nevada Agreement on allocation of opioid recoveries and authorization for the city manager to submit a letter of intent and grant application to the Nevada Department of Health and Human Services for the Fund for Resilient Nevada for programs for up to approximately $750,000 per year or upon approval to June 30th, 2027. Is Ms. Aker or Ms. Paulson going to start us off? Ms. Paulson.
All right, so the board approved the opioid community needs assessment that was presented at the work session that was held on February 29th, 2024. But at that meeting, the board requested that staff return with an implementation plan that addressed the purpose of each of the tactics and performance measures to determine if that tactic was successful. So after the retreat, staff from the various city departments developed the implementation plan and determined that the items on the proposed spending request spreadsheets would be the best use of opioid funds received directly by the city or through state grants to remediate the harms, impacts, and risks to the community caused by the opioid epidemic. And let's see. If the implementation plan is approved, staff can provide an annual report to the Board of Supervisors similar to what we do for our strategic plan that would show the progress on each of the tactics. So there are two spreadsheets that were in your packet. The first one is the proposed programs to be paid from the city's direct allocation of opioid funds. And then in addition, the state released a notice of funding opportunity on June 3rd for, they're allowing up to $7 million in state grants that can be applied for. So for those state grants, you can request up to $750,000 per grant award per year. And there's 3 different project periods. The first one would start December 1st of 2024 or upon approval of a grant application, if that comes first, through June 30th of 2025. And then July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 26, and then the last one goes through June 30th of 2027. So a letter of intent is due tomorrow, June 21st, and the applications for those state funds are due on July 26th. So in that notice of funding opportunity, it says the application should be broken out by target area, and the city's opioid needs assessment plan includes 3 target areas that are in line with the state's plan. And those are prevent the misuse of opioids and other substances, enhance behavioral health treatment resources, and enhance prevention and treatment efforts in the criminal justice system. When we were first looking at that notice of funding opportunity, it wasn't clear whether, since that first period is less than a year, it wasn't sure whether they were going to allocate the full 750,000, or if that would have to be prorated for the 7 months. But the state posted a Q&A last Friday, and they said that in that first period, you can request up to a maximum of 750,000. So given that new information, if you're looking at the spending request spreadsheets, we're requesting that some of the one-shot funds that we had in fiscal 25 under the city's direct allocation, we're requesting that those be moved and requested through a grant application to the state. And that would be the sheriff's office drug incinerator, and then the drug testing equipment upgrades and lab improvements under the Department of Alternative Sentencing. So that would increase the request to the state for fiscal 25 up to $572,000. I believe that there's going to be many more grant opportunities from the state. As I looked at their spreadsheet that shows all of their settlements, and it looks like they're going to get over $422 million as of right now, and it could go up higher than that. So with that, I have representatives from each of the departments. So if you had any particular questions on the implementation plan or what's being requested to be spent from the city's direct allocation versus the state grant funds.
Any member have a question? So I'll just start with one. If we move the sheriff's office incinerator and the DAS drug testing into the state requested grant, did you say that brings us to 572, not 750? So we're still not going to
Right,
apply
we're
for the
still
whole
not.
750? We don't have another one shot or something that we can move to at least apply for the state money up to the 750? Not that we can't just go
No.
in with the 572. And then just for this board, when will the state be doing their grant, the awards?
September 9th.
September 9th. So I'd like to, or I would anyway, to leave the sheriff's office and the DAS kind of in both, right? So I don't want it, if we aren't successful getting some of the items from the state, I don't want to remove it from the city's plan. So that we're just clear that we'll still work to those 2 goals. So try to get it in the state grant, but go ahead and leave it on the city's priority list because we're not replacing those items with other things from the city.
Right.
Right? Okay, I just,
And I mean, we could possibly, there's residential, well, not that one, because I don't think we can get that done in time. But I mean, there's the GPS that I don't know if we could request, the first 3 years from the state and then revert it back to being paid under the city. That's not a large dollar amount, but to add any more of the positions into
do
the
positions.
state will put us over the 750.
Yeah.
They also won't pay for training under the state
On the
grant.
state one, so we can't move those.
Right.
Okay? You'll have to come to the record. I'm terribly sorry. I get you, Chuck, but do it right. Do it right. Mr. Rogers.
Good morning, Chuck Rogers. I'm the public defender. We're talking about the state funding. The question is, can you move some of the furniture allocations for the new positions out of the city funding over to the state and have the state fund that out of that first 750?
I can ask, but I don't believe if the position is not being requested through the state grant that they would pay for the corresponding furniture. And Nikki's the expert in the DHHS grants.
No?
Usually they won't. Yeah.
You got to have both halves. I liked his idea, though. Again, trying to leave as much available for us to respond to unknown things as possible and get the rest from the state.
So Nikki Aker, Director of Carson City Health and Human Services. In my experience with the grants, if you're not funding the position, then they will not fund furniture or a computer because it's not being funded out of that grant. So that's been my experience with state grants.
Okay. Supervisor Schutte.
Thank you. In regards to the state funding, I know with the targeting, innovative and new approaches, not limited to activities and treatment that are sustainable, and I know the sustainable is brought up a lot. Could additional requests for funding be in reference to follow-up for support of services? So when we get people into treatment, into that initial, that survive mode, if we're thinking, that kind of thing. But then that follow-up services, so often with treatment, there's relapse there, or after treatment or after a series of counseling opportunities, going back into one's regular environment without that other long-term added support can sometimes undermine the progress that's made. So could there be a more robust element to that side, so more of the follow-up treatment? Did I make any sense on that?
Yeah, I'm wondering if that is something that wouldn't be done through the city.
Okay.
That it would be, done through a drug rehab clinic or
Vendors.
vendors.
Where my
That's what I'm
initial,
looking for.
that's where my initial notes were within the city, but then just in terms of how, are there ways to access other state monies to free that city money up?
Nikki Aker, Director of Carson City Health and Human Services. Good point. And the city's not the only one that can apply for these funds.
Mhm.
So I would see that in a treatment program. Now, I know that the CCBHCs, which are the Certified Community Behavioral Health Centers, they are not eligible to apply for this funding, but they get funding from other sources. And I can see where that would be part of their program. Or maybe, we could have an agreement maybe down the road, we see a need, and that's the city helping out in some way. But I think that would be down the road and
Okay.
figure out, let's figure out what we need
Absolutely.
Because there's
and
going to
I-
be other funding opportunities.
Great. I just love the idea of having that sustainability component actually built in from the beginning. Not that it has to be worked out at the beginning, but to plant that seed, since it was such a part of both sections of the packet. It is difficult that it is that the one-time funding, if you will, and yet the request for sustainability. So that can get a little complicated. But I think if right now we really think about creative ways to enhance the success rate, I think it's a good plan. Thanks.
Does anybody else? I don't see anyone else with any questions. Is there any public comment? Oh,
Mayor?
yes, Stacy.
Thank
Supervisor
you.
Giomi.
Two things. I wanted to acknowledge the fact that we put in some disposal kits. I like that for folks at home, because I know it's an issue now. I hear that quite often from people as ways to dispose of medications, and there's really not a safe way to do that. So I really like that component in here. And I think my suggestion that I'm going to make now is probably something we can look at down the road as additional funds become available. But what brought my comment to light, or the comment I'm about to make to light, is I recently had a discussion with an adjoining county to the north of us who had an incident recently where another county was sending people to their county for treatment without, to be specific, a nonprofit within an adjoining county was sending people to Washoe County for treatment. And that treatment was falling on the shoulders of Washoe County, their budget, and the citizens of Washoe County. So, and I'm not sure, I think we all in Carson have a sense that there's a strong likelihood that, just like we're a shopping hub and a government hub, we are likely a medical and service provider hub. And because of that, I suspect we're getting a fair number of people from adjoining counties to us, possibly even counties to the west of us, for treatment that may or may not be returning to their communities. And I would just like to have an honest assessment of where we stand relative to that, and whether some of those folks who are coming here for treatment are in fact staying here and becoming the responsibility of us and our citizens, or are they returning to their communities to rehabilitate there? As Lisa just mentioned, there are relapses. And if those people started in another county and came here and remained here, which, obviously is their free will, but if the county or a nonprofit in those counties is sending them here, then, that's another issue. And I don't know that we know the depth of that problem. I think anecdotally, we've heard comments from citizens at our meetings. We've also heard from nonprofits that they're monitoring those things. But I guess I'd feel comfortable if we really sat down and had a solid look at that with input from our service providers and our nonprofits in the community, and even ourselves. And I include even the hospital in that. I don't know that they track that info, and I know there's HIPAA regulations to get through, but scrubbing data and just having a determination as to where people are coming from and even whether they're returning, I think will help us in the long run figure out how we can discuss that issue with those adjoining counties and see if we can get some cooperation from them. And we've talked about it peripherally quite a bit, but I'd really like to find a way to get into the data.
Thank you. Supervisor White.
Thank you. Stacy's comments there kind of triggered some thoughts of my own. But first, in regards to folks coming here from somewhere else for services, as I read the indigent care provisions within NRS, we have pretty substantial leverage to mitigate the cost to Carson City when that happens. Secondarily, what came to my mind just now, I wonder if there is a place for this money to provide training within the sheriff's department not only on the street, but in the jail itself, training to help our officers deal with people that are in severe detox. I think we're starting to see some of that too.
I think we have an opportunity, if we move the 2 items to the state funding and we get lucky, then that would free up that incinerator money and stuff that we could then look to
Right.
reallocate within the city for any needs that we weren't able to address
Right.
when we put that, and that may be a viable option to come back. So
It may-
September will, 9th-ish, we'll know, so we may
Yeah.
be able to do a small reallocation in the city funds.
In
Good idea.
an effort to protect people's privacy, I can share with you offline why this detox training for our deputy sheriffs has become important.
Certainly. City Manager Paulson?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that training is an allowed use for our direct allocations. So we could certainly add that to the list. And then I just wanted to follow up on Supervisor Schuette's comments on, in section 2.4 of the NOFO, it talks about who's eligible to apply for the state grants, and it's regional, county, local, and tribal agencies, nonprofit and for-profit private sector organizations, and institutions of higher learning whose work relates to opioid abatement. So I think what we tried to focus on was what we could actually do as the city, but their funds are available to all the other entities.
And I think it's a good idea that we're focusing on what the city is providing because we can track it. So often we provide funding, but we lose the ability to know whether or not it was effective. This way, we're accountable to ourselves, right? Is our team hitting the target that we put in the document? Is it effective? Is it working? Are we seeing it reduce opioid use? I'm concerned on one of the statistics that was put out, and what bothers me the most is I don't like a statistic that is isolated and unto itself. And so it just looks bad. So we have one out there with the doctors that are prescribing opioids in Carson City, and we are considerably higher than the rest of the state. And so but it's in a vacuum, and that's what really bothers me. I can't see what other feeders are in that. Is it the pharmacy? So is it also people from Douglas County and Story County that are coming in and picking up their prescriptions? And so therefore we're getting tagged with it because, again, as Stacy said, we're a service provider and we don't have enough population to mitigate that answer, right? And so I think that statistic, unless I'm wrong, and Nikki's telling me I'm kind of right, that it's the pharmacy that they picked it up at. And so it's not necessarily a Carson City resident or even necessarily a Carson City doctor, but I think they're getting tagged in this one. And do we have more data or things that we can isolate and work with the pharmacy board, work with our doctors? Is Carson City really having an issue? I mean, that was alarming to me. And so any thoughts would be wonderful.
So Nikki Aker, Director of Carson City Health and Human Services. Yes, I feel we do have a lot of individuals that they utilize our services, utilize our pharmacies. So I think, these are my thoughts, that yes, you're exactly right. And then where it becomes a problem is our population, because it's all broken out per 100,000. So then we look higher. I can dig into it more and see if we can get more information. I know that we cannot get information from the prescription program, but maybe we can dig down into some of those stats and request some more information from the state if they have it. So I'll work on that.
Yeah, maybe the zip code of the person that picked up the prescriptions, how many were in, like I said, from Dayton or Douglas, something, and maybe even work with, I don't know, is there a physicians association or group? Anything we can do as a team in this community to address the issues would be to me helpful. Because I don't
Absolutely.
want to tag them as, oh, you're over, it looks like from that report that they're over prescribing. And I don't want to say that our doctors are doing that
Correct.
without true knowledge. So
So we'll
anything we
work
can-
on that.
Thank you.
and
I
See if we can
appreciate
dig
that.
into it more.
Thank you.
One,
Supervisor Schutte.
just one more quick question. So on page 508, tactic 4, and so this would be the city. So on the performance measures, and I guess this ties into what I asked earlier. So for the city, on the follow-up within 1 year of diversion intervention to see if the individual has reoffended, can we include in that, and it might just be too much detail, and so if it doesn't need to be included, I understand, but when they reoffended, where it took place, how many times. So within that 1 year, I just think that for the data collection, so it isn't in a vacuum, so we really see the efficacy of the program and that we can really support it. I just think that's good information, but again, it might be something that doesn't need to be included in this,
Right.
but should be included.
Mhm. Okay. I'm. So long as it's not 3.
Well,
Thank you.
Chuck Rogers, I'm a public defender. We have our specialty courts, and in the specialty courts, we have people that fall off the wagon. It's part of recovery. We don't necessarily track that data the way I think you want to track it. If somebody has a positive drug test, they do a sanction, they get back on their feet, they increase their counseling. There'll come a time, if they continue, where they will be removed from the specialty court program. That information we can track a little easier than what you're asking us to do, because that would require us to pull data. My office, even though we represent the people in these specialty courts, we don't really have their files. So if Joe Smith is in mental health court and has a positive drug test, he's going to get a sanction, but I don't have any way to track that. And then that would require the court to do that, and that's why I was asking if this is going to be a 2-part. So if that's the level that you're looking at, probably not going to be able to track that. What's more important is once they successfully complete the program, how long? When do we get that recidivism rate, at least here in Carson City? Obviously, we're not going to know if they get arrested in Clark County or Washoe County. We won't know that. But if they're here and there are citizens here that are reoffending, we'll be able to track that for you. That makes much more sense on success programs. That would be my suggestion.
And that makes sense. So, and I agree 100%. So thank you for the clarification because I think it's an important conversation. Thank you.
Wait, just say one more. So when I worked at the Department of Corrections, and your first issue is always the definition of recidivism. What is that? What is it? What does it look like? But one of the things that, so right now our tactic is we'll look at 1 year. Is the history for reoffense, I'm just wondering if we should look at the 3-year mark too. It's just another bullet to say, okay, they might have made it through the 1 year, but they didn't make it through the 3-year. And that's something we did at corrections because all of our programmatic goals and things that you're putting together, you had a really high success rate if they made it 3 years. 1 year wasn't quite enough that people tended to, I don't know, they came right back in or something. But when we kept them on a 3-year glide, so I'm just wondering if we should add, and we can do this in a year when we review all these tactics and results, but just keep in mind, I'm thinking that we should also look, did they make it 3 years? Because then we really know that the money we're investing is changing lives. I mean, and that's what we're all about here, right? Is to change people's lives, decisions, help them make better decisions.
Most of the studies that we have look at the
Yeah.
3 and the 5 year.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Look at 3 and 5 years for recidivism rates and whether or not treatment's been successful. If you've got somebody that's been clean and sober for 5 years, that's a pretty good indication that they're going to remain that way. But I just have a client who's been clean for 15 years and fell off the wagon.
Yeah.
You know, a life event happened,
Right.
and as a result of that life event,
Went back.
they fell back into old ways. Now they're back in my office, and we're going to be working with that individual, trying to get that individual moving forward. What I don't want is I don't want people to think that anything beyond every one of my clients that are drug users, I tell them, today's going to be a great day because you didn't use.
Mm-hmm.
Today's going to be a great day because you didn't use. Today's a great day because you didn't go back to jail. So it really depends how we value their sobriety. If they don't value it, they'll be back. If they value it, every day is a success if they don't use. So I want to keep that in mind as we're progressing forward as well with this program and how we're measuring success and how we define success. If I can keep a juvenile from ever touching, I'll never know, and neither will you.
Right.
What we will see is we'll see a reduction in the use, the number of clients that come into contact with law enforcement while under the influence of not just opioids, but even juvenile marijuana, alcohol, methamphetamine, cocaine's making its way back into our systems, heroin, fentanyl. The reduction is what we want to see. That's how we actually measure success, is whether or not we have a reduction in the number of contacts for these types of issues. That's what I think the measure really is in the long run.
Great, thank you.
So was that a yes? We should go ahead and track it 3 years?
3 and 5, I think.
Okay, so I'd like to add that in on the tactic. Again, we won't have data to put into the report on the first year, you know, as we're moving along, but I'd like to add that into the tactic because long-term sustainability across your community is what I think all of us are after here.
And and absolutely, and I so appreciate the conversation and yeah, so thank you, because really hearing from that ground floor and the positive impact and the different ways of measuring is so important for people to understand, so thank you.
Well, and I think it's really unique that we have a long-term funding source here, that we can actually look to determine if there's a best practice, right? You know, what did we get right is, hey, we're doing good, we should put more into home kits. Or, whoop, this one's not doing so well, so let's strike that and put more over here where our effectiveness is. So I think we would be wise to do a little more tracking intervals. So if we could add that in, okay? Is there any public comment on this item before we come back up for a motion? Mr. French.
Denny French, thank you. Having a family situation that involves opioids, this is a close to the heart type situation. Then the next part I'd like to say is I had the honor and the privilege of being able to go to a special court years ago here in Carson, and that was not easy to get involved in. I had to be cleared, and I appreciated that experience very much and the work that people did to try to help people get on their road to recovery and their encouragement. So thank you all.
Thanks, Denny. Is there anybody else? Okay, then I'll bring it back up for a motion. Supervisor Schutte.
I move to approve the implementation plan, the proposed plan as adjusted for the use of funds received directly through the agreement, and authorize the city manager to submit a LOI and grant application to Department of Health and Human Services, adding the sheriff's office incinerator and the DAS drug testing equipment upgrades and lab improvements to the Department of Health and Human Services application based on the discussion.
And did you want to
I'll
add
second.
the
Oh,
increased tactics for
Yes, thank you.
tracking?
And to add the increased tracking to 3 years or
recidivism rates?
recidivism.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
And I'll still second.
Second. Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? We got that one? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Thank you all for a good job, and I really appreciate that we're going to do performance metrics. I don't know what the other entities are doing, but I'm very proud. I know it's a little more work for our staff, but I'm very proud that we don't want to just do money for the sake of what we think, but that we track it. So good job. Okay, we're gonna move on. I have so much writing on this to agenda item 19, which is our non-action items. Ms. Paulson, do you have anything to report?
I just wanted to remind everybody to come to the board meeting again tomorrow at 8 a.m. for the canvassing of the vote, and we'll get Supervisor Giomi, make sure he has a link to get into that meeting. And then just another reminder that the first meeting in July will be held on July 3rd due to the 4th of July holiday. And that's it.
Okay, does any member have anything they wish to share? Supervisor White?
Thank you. I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention that over the last year and a half or so over at Nevada Works, we have been working very diligently to improve the workforce education program. We got a grant from the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities part of the federal government, $15 million. We recently finished our strategic plan and put out an RFQ for an operator to do that. A little bit unfortunate, the long-standing group known as Join did not get past the application process, and we'll be moving over to a company called Equus Workforce Solutions. So look to see actually some pretty good things happening in that realm that we've always known as Join workforce education.
Okay, I look forward to seeing those changes. Anybody else have anything to share? No? Okay, maybe I'm going to put you on the spot just because I'm pretty sure that other people have been receiving comments, questions, et cetera, et cetera. Can you explain a little bit, Ms. Paulson, the RSVP fireworks? I've been getting a ton of questions of where can you see those from if we don't go to the golf course? So what can you help the public understand on that?
I think there should be a couple articles coming out fairly soon on that, but we are opening up the lower fields at Centennial Park that you'll be able to go onto the fields and, put a blanket down and watch from there. And there's also parking that will be available throughout Centennial for the general public to go and park and view the fireworks.
And then just a little bit more on the why for the move. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding out in the community is, why are you moving it from Mills Park? Why, and talk about a little bit. Too bad the fire chief left, because I think it's important for the public to understand, right? It's all about safety, but
Right. Initially, they would shoot them off from the high school, but there are things that are going on at the high school where there's not the fallout zone. I was going to say clear zone. And so they weren't able to do it from the high school anymore. And then the last couple of years, they moved a little bit south of that to where they were doing some construction or building some houses. Is it Lampa Ranch? And they were able to use that area because the construction hadn't progressed, and so they were able to have the fallout zone worked there. But now that the houses have been developed, we needed a more open space to be able to shoot off the fireworks. So Duncan Golf worked with RSVP and allowed them to use the golf course. And RSVP is also having a fundraising event there.
And then just a final piece, I'm trying to hit every email I've received here on a question. There was concern from the neighborhood in the area, is there fire watch, so there was an article, sorry, it's on you, but there was an article that was out there that kind of indicated that there isn't any residential around the new location, and they took exception to that and said, well, I think we all live around here, so who's going to be protecting us and making sure that they're not within a fallout zone? So I assured them that the fire department had measured. Right.
The fallout zone is within the footprint of Centennial Park. It does not go into the residential areas. And we'll also have, the fire department will have staff at the site in case there's any issues.
And then the fire department also uses, because to me, the concern is wind, which takes you maybe potentially outside your fallout zone. And Fireman Stacy's up there, but I assured them that if it was too windy and it was going to change their projections or their zones, then they would unfortunately have to call the event and say, we can't do it. So safety is always the ultimate concern, right? And it's what we always do. We don't want to lose the fireworks, but safety first, unless I've missed something. Did I
Stacy?
get that kind of right, Stacy, about the wind could carry embers where we don't want them?
Yeah, you're correct. I mean, the permit that's issued for the construction is based off the number and size of the shells that are being shot off. And that determines the fallout zone and how far of an area that needs to be cleared. And then the wind is factored into that originally, so that there's an allowable wind. I don't know the exact number, say it's up to 10 miles an hour, that would accommodate that fallout zone. And if the wind is above that, then the fire department makes a determination at the time that they're getting lit off as to whether they go or wait a little bit longer. I think it was a couple of years ago that the fireworks got shut off the next night because it was too windy on the actual night of the event.
Correct. Okay. I just thought I'd get that on the record so people had hopefully, they still don't maybe like the answers, but at least they know why. Okay, nobody else has anything? We will have a brief closed session to confer with our council. So we'll call you, Stacy. But is there any final public comment? Mr. French.
Denny French, thank you. My final comment is relating to my original opening comment. I talked to the fire chief for a bit, and he's amenable to the fact that any conversation he's going to have with open space should be or could possibly be publicly viewed, or at least transparent to the public. I think it's an important enough matter coming fire season to have that. And I would like to ask for actually an emergency meeting relating to such, because I feel it so strongly that this little slip While you can't prevent forest fires anytime completely, you do your best. And if we can't even show our best and we keep promoting that we're a fire safety concern or consideration public, we need to have at least on a agenda a full set for a public understanding of what's done, what's required for the public as barbecues or on the hill as far as OHVs or public access. So I really feel that. Also, I'd like to suggest that 3 minutes is really tough for me after going over a whole agenda and having not the ability to bring it up during the actual agenda. If I don't say it, it's not going to get sent in unless it's brought into it. You can't know why I pulled it out. So that 3-minute rule is tough. I appreciate the fact that you all are here. I'm frustrated by at times, the lack of discussion, because I need your discussion to know where you're at, why you're at, and how to respond. If it's just a vote yay or nay on things, I can't read it. I don't know where I'm missing a point. I don't know what I should have known differently or what I could have maybe contributed as far as my understanding and viewpoint. I really am upset still by the lack of response from open space. And through the chief, I got some information that I don't feel I'm comfortable sharing because I think it would be his place to say what happened or why it happened, his understanding of that, not my understanding of his understanding. So thank you all very much for being here. Please, please, please consider getting this on the agenda. We need to have a spot, and I would like to urge it to be public, not interdepartmental. I don't want that. I want transparency. This is such a big deal. I'm up there going, wait a minute. This is not right. I try to stay informed. I didn't know until I heard it on the television. I didn't know to think about it. And they were tending to suggest that riders should keep themselves appraised. And I think that's silly and foolish. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Okay. Do I have any other public comment? Okay, not seeing any. Then if there's no objection, we're adjourned. Give us just a couple of minutes and we'll do the closed door. Thank you.